Today, we are going to be taking another laboring step forward in tackling my physical TBR shelf. So I have about 100-ish unread books currently on my shelf, give or take a couple. And at the beginning of 2025, I set a goal for myself to read at least 20 of those books. I wanted to read 1/5 of my current TBR bookshelf. And to help me with that, back in April, I created a TBR cart-ish. I had this little old vintage table that I bought, where I was able to put about 15 books on that cart to help me and encourage me to keep reading the physical books that I already own that are on my TBR. So back in April, when I made my TBR cart, I used the TBR jar and random prompts to help me kind of build that. And since then, I have read 4 books off of that TBR cart, which is not a lot, but it is something. And total for the year since January, I have read 5 physical books off of my TBR. That is 5 books that I have not bought in 2025. I bought them a previous year. Maybe it was even the end of 2024. It doesn't matter. Books that I have not bought in 2025 is kind of what I'm counting for that metric. And I've only read 5. So I have technically 15 books to go before I reach my goal to read 20 books off my TBR by the end of the year. It's doable, but for a mood reader that really changes up the types of books that I'm reading on even a day-to-day basis, that has proven to be quite challenging. In an effort to help me cross the finish line by the end of 2025, I'm going to use the TBR jar that I've made for myself to help me pick my August reads for this upcoming month. I've been reading about 6 books every single month. It has varied throughout the year, but I think for the last 4 or 5 months, I've hit exactly 6 books. So my plan is to use this TBR jar to actually pick 5 books. The goal would be to pick it off of my TBR cart, but if there's not a book that fits that specific prompt, I can go to my shelf and pick something, but it has to be something that's been on my shelf since pre-2025 is the only metric I'm giving. So I'm gonna pick 5 books just because, again, you know yourself, I'm a mood reader. There's a chance that the 5 books that I pick, once I actually go to read them, I'm not going to want to read them. I definitely have some books in my mind of ones that I really want to read for this upcoming month, so I'm going to try to use the prompts to get what I want out of this, but we know that that doesn't always work. So let's just go ahead and pick our 5 prompts right now. Got quite a few in there. All right. I haven't used this since April, so I forget a lot of the prompts that are in here, to be honest. Grab it. The first prompt is a book whose title could be a Taylor Swift song. I like that. Next is a book you've been avoiding. I did a whole video on books that intimidate me to read. See if I can find one on that cart. Okay, this one, I'm actually gonna redraw this prompt because it is defeating the entire purpose of what I actually wanna do with this, which is the last book that you bought, but I'm trying not to read books that I recently bought. So I'm gonna put that back in the jar and try for something else. The first book you own that's on the New York Times best sellers list. That is gonna require some research on my part. I wonder if I do have some that's on there. Looking for 2 more. Pick a book with mixed reviews. Ooh, that will also require a little bit of research. And last one. Ooh, read the next book in a series you've started. This one is one that I wasn't necessarily looking for because I really want to start some series. This month, I really wanted to potentially start The Poppy War or An Ember in the Ashes are kind of the 2 that are on my mind right now because I just finished Throne of Glass this month, my reread of Throne of Glass. It has been really a long journey. I started it at the end of December in 2024, and I really intentionally wanted to take my time rereading Throne of Glass because the first time that I read Throne of Glass, I binged that thing. It went so quickly. And then afterwards, I was in one of the worst book hangovers of my entire life because how do you move on from that when it's been all consuming for so long? So this time on my reread, I wanted to take my time, read it slowly, not just go through the book slowly, but literally on the page, read it slowly, try to get every detail possible because especially when you're excited about a book that you're reading, I tend to just kind of skim a couple sentences here and there, not skim reading by any means, but you just are reading so fast that a couple of the details or the adjectives or descriptions, they just kind of get lost for a second until you get to the next bout of dialogue. So I really wanted to slow down with it, and it took me about 7 months to finish, which is a long time, but it's done. That was kind of my major series that I was focusing on. And so now I was looking to start another series like The Poppy War or An Ember in the Ashes, but I am in the middle of a lot of series or duologies that are just not not exciting to me. There's not a ton that I'm looking forward to reading the next book, even if I loved the first book or the last book that I read. There's just not a lot that I'm super excited about right now. And Ember in the Ashes is interesting though, because I have already read the first book, and then I didn't read any other ones because they weren't out yet, and I just unfortunately tended to lose steam. I read the first book, loved it. It was so fun from what I remember. I think it was back in 2018, so I don't remember a ton of it. And I just never picked up the second book when it came out because I had to wait for like a year, and then I wasn't as interested anymore. So that could maybe fudge a little bit, where technically it is a series that I was in the middle of and I could read the next book, but I want to go back and read the first book before that. I don't know. We'll kind of see how it goes. But the 5 prompts we have chosen, just to reiterate, is a book whose title could be a Taylor Swift song, a book with mixed reviews, a book you've been avoiding, the first book you own that's on the New York Times bestsellers list, and the next book in a series that you've started. So I am going to take these prompts, go to the shelf real quick, and pick my books, and then we'll come back and talk about them. Okay, we're back, and I think I feel pretty good about my picks. Let's go through them. So the first one that I have is a book with mixed reviews. Now, I will say for this one in particular, I didn't really go on Goodreads and try to find something with mixed reviews. I just looked at my shelf and found a book that I have personally seen on YouTube or TikTok and Instagram where people are not really sure about it, or maybe some people really like it, or some people are kind of disappointed in it, and that is Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales. Now, I'm cheating a little bit with this one because this was published in 2025, early 2025. However, this is one of the books that I put on my TBR cart, kind of stacked up there. So technically, I'm including it in this list because I pulled it off of the TBR cart. And I think I got this in January or February. So we're including it in the list. This is the conclusion to the Emily Wilde series. If anybody has read that, the first one is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. Second is Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales. And then the third one, Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. Nope, I mixed that up. Second one is Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. Third one, Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales. Oh my gosh, my brain. I love the Emily Wilde books. The first 2 are true cozy fantasy in my opinion. The way that it's written is you're reading out of Emily Wilde's field diary essentially, and I love the character of Emily because she is an academic through and through. She is very logical, very serious. She is not really one that knows how to take a joke or really understand sarcasm. She just takes everything that she hears or sees at face value, which makes her a very strategic, liturgical person. And the way that she writes, that kind of shows through. But one of the things that I love about this is as we're reading, getting to know all of the other characters in the series, they understand this about Emily, that she takes everything really at face value. And so they kind of play with her. They don't make fun of her, but they will play jokes on her, or they will say something with sarcasm knowing that she doesn't understand it, and then Emily will be talking about it in her field notes that us, the reader, are reading, and we know that the other people are making a joke. So it kind of is a very unifying thing between the reader and the rest of the characters in this book, where like Emily is the only one that doesn't know what's going on. And I think that was a very immersive way to read a book. At least for me personally, it felt like I was kind of in on the joke. It felt like a very tongue-in-cheek way to have this writing happen. So I really enjoyed that about the first 2 books. Again, they're just so cozy, easy to read. They're not super long, and I like the writing style of it a lot. There's also adorable romance in the first 2 books. Don't know what happens in the third book, but I've heard that it's a lot of the same. And I really enjoyed that as well. The side characters are just delightful in my opinion. I think the reason that I've been dragging my feet reading this one is just because I wasn't in the mood for like a really cozy fantasy. I've been wanting to read some things that are a little bit more fast-paced, or if I'm reading something considered maybe cozy, it's been a lot of the really short, quick reads like the Morisaki Bookshop or something like that. So I just haven't really picked this up, but not necessarily because I don't want to read it. It's just been moving down the list a little bit, but I do want to complete the series and get it done with, and I'm excited to kind of jump into the last 3rd book and to just be with the characters once again. I really enjoyed them and really enjoyed the world that this takes place in. So I am excited to read this, and I definitely think they'll be able to get to it this month. Next prompt was read the next book in a series you've started. Now, I was very tempted to go with An Ember in the Ashes, but it just didn't feel right because I would be starting at the first book, and I think this prompt is really intended to be for the second book or the third book in a series. So I played it safe, especially because I kind of cheated with Emily Wilde being published in 2025. So I picked up Nothing Like the Movies by Lynn Painter. This is the sequel to the book Better Than the Movies, which is a young adult rom-com essentially that I really enjoyed. It was very sweet writing, very sweet characters, and I had a great time with it. It is not a book that I expected to have a sequel, to be honest. It felt very conclusive, which is why I haven't picked up the sequel book yet, because I haven't really felt the need for it. There was not a cliffhanger. There was not this big question mark left at the end of Better Than the Movies. It just felt like a very contained story. And so I wasn't really compelled to pick up Nothing Like the Movies because I didn't really have any unanswered questions. However, as I was making this list with all of these prompts, I was picking up a lot of books that were longer and maybe a little bit heavier. And I knew that I was going to need something quick and fast and probably in the romance category. So this fit the prompt of being the next in a series, and I think is something that realistically I will want to slot in between a couple of other books that I'm planning on reading in August. So the first book follows Liz and Wes. They are neighbors. They weren't really like childhood friends necessarily, but not even really childhood enemies either. They just kind of existed in their own separate worlds. And the whole first book happens where Wes is trying to help Liz get her crush to ask her out to prom, but of course they slowly fall in love with each other through that process and become really good friends. And then at the end of the book, sorry if this is a spoiler, but I think you would be able to guess this going into it, they get together. So it's a happy ending. It takes place, they're all high school characters, which is something that I was not necessarily thinking that I would enjoy when I first picked up the book, just because I haven't read a lot of young adult fiction recently, and I definitely haven't been able to relate to characters that are that much younger than me in a while. It's funny when I think about reading books when I was younger, like The Hunger Games or Divergent, and all of the characters feel so much older than me because I was younger than them at the time, and now looking back on it, you're like, oh, Katniss was 16 and I'm a lot older than that. And so it's just kind of a little bit of a mental disconnect for me right now. I can still enjoy the books, but it's not always when I'm gravitating towards picking up. But I was really pleasantly surprised with Nothing Like the Movies because it felt like even though the characters were young and even though the genre is young adult, it really went deep. There were deep topics and themes that were explored that I felt like really got their place on the page. It was emotional, it was romantic, it was sweet and funny, and I really enjoyed it. And then I read another young adult Lynn Painter book called Betting on You, and I really didn't enjoy that one. And I don't really know why. I think it's just because the story I didn't really like. I didn't like the characters at all. And so I'm kind of in a tension with Lynn Painter where on this hand, Better Than the Movies as a young adult book, I really, really enjoyed. Betting on You really didn't enjoy. So I'm curious to see where Nothing Like the Movies is going to fall on that spectrum. Okay, the next prompt was the first book you own that's on the New York Times bestseller list. This was the hardest prompt to find because as I was looking up the New York Times bestseller list, it was all really recent books from 2025, which I'm really trying to avoid, and ones that I have already read at this point. So I had to find one that I have not read. And the first book technically on the bestsellers list that I own that I haven't read is The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig, but I just bought that one, so I'm not really counting that as an eligible book for this video. So then I had to go back pretty far and ended up looking at the 2024 New York Times bestseller list, and there were a couple of books at the beginning that I did own that were on the list. However, I bought them very recently, so I really had to thread the needle of something that I've had for a while that was on the list from 2024, and I ended up choosing Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. If I'm remembering correctly, I do actually think that this is one that I also bought in 2025, but like Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales, this is a book that I put on my original TBR cart, and I think I've had this for quite a while now, so I'm kind of going with that loophole and considering this as an eligible book. I gotta be honest though, if there is any book that's gonna fall off my TBR for August, it's probably gonna be Intermezzo. I'm just not really in a spot where I'm interested in reading it. I have never read a Sally Rooney book before. I know a lot about her writing style. I know there's no quotation marks, which doesn't really bother me that much. I've read books before where there's no quotation marks, and I think I'm able to get into it pretty well. This is a longer one of her books. I don't think her books are typically this hefty, and I just just know that this is gonna be a tough one for me to get through, especially if we're just going off of kind of mood reading here. So not that I'm making a self-fulfilling prophecy right now saying that I'm not gonna read this book. I'm gonna do my best to read this book, but I also am not gonna hold myself to such tight rules, because I think if I force myself to read some of these when I really don't want to, just to mark them off of my list, it could put me in a little bit of a reading slump, or I might not be able to get to the other ones that I actually want to get to. So I'm holding this one loosely, but I am considering it as on my TBR for the month of August. If anybody has read Intermezzo and enjoyed Intermezzo, please convince me why I should read it in the comments. Okay, we're probably not super surprised by this one, but a book you've been avoiding. Now, hear me when I say this. I know that I have said multiple times that I'm excited to read The Poppy War, and I am excited to read it, but it is a book that I've been avoiding for a long time. When this was first getting popular, when the whole series was popular, I immediately was drawn to it. It's fantasy, it's a strong female lead, it's a trilogy. I just heard so many amazing things about it. So as soon as it was becoming popular, I looked it up, read the synopsis, was so close to buying it, and then just started seeing some people say how intense it is and how there are very difficult parts in the book to get through. And that really intimidated me, and it kind of scared me off from reading it back then. So I have been avoiding it for a while. However, I feel ready to tackle this series. I feel excited to tackle this series, especially now that I have finished Throne of Glass and I don't really have another series like that that's really hanging over me. I think this is something that I want to put a lot of time and effort into. So I'm excited to read it. I'm intimidated to read it. I have been avoiding it in the past, but now I was really just looking for an excuse to add this to my TBR in August, if I'm being honest. And I said I was gonna make the prompts work for me, and I did, so there you go. And of course, our last prompt is a book whose title could be a Taylor Swift song, and this one really makes the most sense to me. Outlawed. It's giving me Cowboy Like Me vibes right now. I have no idea what this story is about, and I've actually seen a couple of people comment about sort of some of their feelings after finishing Outlawed when I first put it on my TBR cart, and there's definitely some mixed feelings about it. Another reason why I ended up choosing it is because it's so short, and there are a lot of books in this list here that are over 400 pages, and I just wanted something that I would be able to read really quickly, and it just screams Taylor Swift to me, if I'm being honest. So these are the 5 books that my TBR prompts have chosen for me for the month of August, but there is another book that I want to put in that 6th slot that is breaking the rules. I don't own it yet. I need to purchase it, and that is Miss Newberry's List by Megan Walker. I'm probably going to end up purchasing this on Kindle. I'm not sure if it's on Kindle Unlimited, but I think it's cheaper on Kindle anyway. This is a book club pick for the book club that I'm a part of with my friends and my sister-in-laws, and so this is the pick that we have for the summer, so I have to read it in August because that's the last month to read it. So I am planning on reading that one 100% because I have to. So that kind of falls outside of the TBR cart thing. But these are 5 books that would, if I read them all, put me up to 10 books total off of my physical TBR, which would mean that I would be halfway through my goal of reading 20 books by the end of the year. This is a lot of different genres going on, a lot of different types of books. Again, quite a few thick books too. I'm a little bit nervous about it, but I'm feeling the challenge to tackle this as well as I possibly can. So we will see how it goes. If anybody has read any of these books, give me some reassurance here. Which one should I start with? What ones do we think are really gonna make it into some of my favorites? I have a prediction that it might be The Poppy War, but we will see. And of course, let me know what is on your TBR for the month of August. I would love to see what everybody is reading this next month. As always, thank you so much for joining and watching and hanging out with me on this little corner of the internet, and we'll see you next time.